We still see regime officials openly mocking President Trump. We heard that's one of the reasons that Maduro
Yeah.
ended up, why President Trump was convinced to take action was he saw Maduro doing his stupid little dance. Khamenei is still tweeting jokes about President Trump and memes about him with cartoons. Larry Johnny, they're saying that he's bluffing. They have like the equivalent to Alex Jones is saying, well, I can't even say I can't repeat what he said about President Trump. So they're still mocking him, and they still seem to think that he is bluffing.
Front page of the Times this morning, you'll have seen this picture. I've seen it several times on social media, and it does sort of haunt you, doesn't it? The picture of Irfan Soltani. The 26-year-old is set for execution today in Iran for his role in the protests against the regime. He's charged absurdly with waging war against God. He's far from alone in paying the price for taking on the government. The US human rights activist news agency says 2,571 people have been killed in the protests, but no one really knows. And I've seen numbers that could be into several thousands, more than 10,000. They haven't been confirmed, but there appears to be killing going on at quite the scale. Donald Trump has said help is on the way. What does that mean? One man whose name is often chanted by protesters on the streets is Reza Pahlavi. He's the son of the Shah of Iran and has lived in exile in the US since his father was deposed in 1979. Andrew Ghalili is policy director of the National Union for Democracy in Iran, which is aligned with Reza Pahlavi, and we can speak to him now. Andrew, good morning to you.
Good morning.
One of the fears that we're starting to hear from, but I don't know how true it is because it's very hard to determine these things exactly, is that the protests are starting to reduce. They're starting to shrink because the bloody crackdown is working. And the information that comes out of Iran, the regime are opening it up a little bit to show just how appalling and bloody the crackdown is to frighten people off. What's your assessment of the situation?
Look, we're going to always be seeing less and less videos as internet has been shut for over 132 hours now, I believe. So that is part of the regime's strategy, is to only let some horrifying videos get out, scare people more and more. I don't know that will work in their favor. President Trump is seeing those videos and seems horrified by them and seems to make clear to him that they have crossed his red line that he set multiple times. With that said, we are still seeing videos come out from Tehran and throughout Iran of people showing up on the streets. Over the weekend, when people were already saying that protests were dying down, I think there's a few videos that tell a different story. We saw videos of fireworks in the background. People seemed almost uplifted and celebrating despite getting massacred. We saw people chanting at the police with weapons, chanting at them, "Put your arms down, stand with us," as if the people had power. So the people, this is their fight. As they're chanting, this is the final battle for them. So I don't see it dying down that quickly. But with that said, the regime is going to continue to massacre the people if this continues without foreign intervention.
And how much hope should the Iranian people place on Donald Trump? Because help is on its way, all in the classic all caps Donald Trump responses. And a lot of people thought he's saying that now, something was going to happen in the next 6-10 hours, and nothing seems to have changed. What sort of help is on its way? What sort of help needs to be on its way, do you think?
I think the president, we'll see how quickly he acts. I would take him at his word there. U.S. credibility relies very heavily on, sticking to the red lines that are set. President Trump has repeatedly set this red line and then also repeatedly alluded to Barack Obama failing to enforce that red line by saying, "I am not President Obama." So it would be a very big mistake for President Trump to not follow through on his word, and I can't imagine that happening. With that said, he's being presented with a variety of different options from his administration. At this point, we're hearing that there are parts of the administration that is maybe pushing for more diplomatic solutions. It seems like in the tweet from, I guess, yesterday morning now, he also rejected that offer and said, "I'm canceling all meetings with the Iranians." So I would say, there are a few things that could have delayed military action here, one of them being the Maduro operation recently forcing the U.S. to move a lot of assets down to Venezuela from both EUCOM and CENTCOM. So it's potentially just a case of making sure this is done properly.
And what would help in this area? Because you could go all the way down from someone America managing to, and it's a very difficult place to do this. Managing to take out Khomeini. I mean, they could hit Khomeini. They've got the capacity to do that. They could hit people in the RGC. They could take out some military installations. They could, I suppose, show the protesters that the the parts of the regime that are oppressing them the most are actually now the most vulnerable to outside interference. Is that too far in your view? Could that have a counteractive effect, or would that be the sort of thing that you'd like to see?
No, I think that's falls in line with what we've heard out of Iran, with what we've heard people asking for. I think there's a priority for non-kinetic options as well, such as getting the people back online as
Yeah.
soon as possible. But no, everything you outlined should absolutely be part of the options here. The regime must understand this is it for them. They are falling and the people are winning, and the people need to see that there is real help that shows that they are able to win this fight.
Meanwhile, what do you make of the plight of Irfan Sultani? I know he's only one of thousands, but he just looks like a young guy, doesn't he? He's 26 years old. He looks like someone who lives in very much the modern world, and he's about to be hanged because on the charge for waging war against God.
It's awful. This is what the regime does. This is all it knows. It massacres Iranians. It arrests and executes them with sham trials for no reason. It does this throughout the year, every year. But in moments like this, it feels the need to assert its control and authority, and it will take innocent Iranians and make a public case out of them. President Trump has tried to warn them away from doing that. He even mentioned hanging protesters yesterday to CBS. So
he actually warned them against doing it. He actually said, "Don't do it." But it's very likely they are going to do it, and they are going to celebrate doing it. I guess the question. Sorry, go on.
No, one thing on that, I think it's very surprising. We still see regime officials openly mocking President Trump. We heard that's one of the reasons that Maduro
Yeah.
ended up, why President Trump was convinced to take action was he saw Maduro doing his stupid little dance. Khamenei is still tweeting jokes about President Trump and memes about him with cartoons. Larry Johnny, they're saying that he's bluffing. They have like the equivalent to Alex Jones is saying, well, I can't repeat what he said about President Trump. So they're still mocking him, and they still seem to think that he is bluffing. The president was on the street with the foreign minister, smiling and laughing the other day as a show of force. So, I think that's a mistake on the regime's part, and I think they'll hear that soon.
Yeah, a dangerous game to play against the vanity of Donald Trump. If we've learned nothing over the last 8 years, we surely have learned that. If the regime were to crumble, I guess one question that we're occupying ourselves with a bit is this Reza Pahlavi character. I've got to be honest with you, we've heard mixed messages about him. Some positive, some saying he's not quite the guy to do this. Some are concerned that the previous Shah regime had its own difficulties, its own secret police, its own acts of abuse. Would you countenance a future without Reza Pahlavi as an interim person, or is he the right guy in your view?
My perception is it's not for any of us to decide.
Yeah.
The people on the streets of Iran have made their choice. That is why I'm proud to be working and backing him and to help with the cause. Because the people have made it clear that this is their choice. And that's why I think you see so many people, even many of those who you may have spoken to in the past who were highly critical of the Crown Prince, now coming around and acknowledging he is the only name that has ever been chanted on the streets of Iran. They've chanted against Khamenei and the regime for a long time. They have never chanted for an opposition figure. He is the only person that they have hope to take them from this Islamist dictatorship to a secular democracy. And I think a very large reason for that is he has been consistent and transparent for over 40 years. The Iran Prosperity Project, the transition plan that NUFDI and a team of experts worked with the Crown Prince on, it was developed transparently. It was sent out to the Iranian people. They had the opportunity to give feedback, to read it. The feedback was incorporated. We had 2 conferences on it. All of this has been done openly. He has developed this trust through practical, real means. It is not just because of his name or the legacy. It is because of the work that has been done over the last, 20 years, 40 years. So again, his backing comes from the Iranian people, full stop. The world needs to catch up to them and support them as well.
We'll see what happens over the next 12, 24 hours, see if anything starts to shift again. Andrew, good to speak to you. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
That's Andrew Ghalili, their policy director of the National Union for Democracy in Iran. We had Reza Pahlavi in this studio, didn't we?
Yeah.
About a year ago. Yeah. When it felt actually that, the fact that he sort of came into the studio without an awful lot of pomp probably suggested a year ago how far he felt away from regime change. But now it feels closer, and yet And yet the question is, we thought this morning we'd be reporting on some sort of action from Trump that was visible, and it's not been forthcoming yet. Doesn't mean it's not going to be forthcoming, but as yet we don't know what help is on its way that would justify him saying that and encouraging people to keep protesting, keep tackling these institutions, because America is going to do something.
Yeah, and I think the problem is we talk a lot about Donald Trump doing things and people not supporting them. And once again, here we are waiting for Donald Trump to do something where the rest of the world is not actually stepping up and taking action itself. And the ministers in this government are not saying, well, we'll do something or offering any support, or they won't even talk publicly about offering communication support.
He's the only figure that matters, isn't he, really?
But that's why I suppose, in a way, you can understand why the Trump supporters get frustrated with people saying, oh, he's a loose cannon and, he's all kinds of terrible. But then when something happens, everyone's going, what's Donald Trump going to do about it? Yeah. And it's kind of like, well, there are lots of governments around the world who could also intervene here, and they would have the same questions to answer, by the way, which is, will kinetic intervention, will bombing anything make any difference? Israel has already carried out a campaign of incredibly targeted attacks on the leaders in Iran to some level of success, but we are still here. Yeah. And the regime is still, it is still powerful. It is still killing protesters, and there doesn't seem to be an answer. And Reza Pahlavi, in lots of people's eyes, is a guy who's lived his life in America, in exile, but has never led anything really, and is not necessarily in a position to do so now. And if he's not the answer, then really who or what is it? It's definitely not an intervention by a foreign power then installing its own government. That is definitely not the answer.
The danger is also, you criticise Trump both directions, don't you? Why are you not committed to regime change? But why would you be committed to regime change you can't possibly maintain or support or guarantee? Yeah. The lesson of the last 20 years, if not longer, is when you start trying to dabble in this area, it's very difficult to see it through. American presidents have said stuff, they've done stuff, and the world has got worse as a result of it.
Yeah, we're going to speak to a journalist later on the programme who was locked up in an Iranian jail for 544 days. And he makes the point that Iranians have been asking for Western help for quite a long time. They actually wanted intervention at the time of Iraq and Afghanistan. A lot of people inside the country were saying, what about us? Now the question is, what are you going to do to help us from the ground up? So we'll speak to a couple of other people throughout the programme today and bring you up to date with everything that happens in Iran.